The trunk containing Catherine Montgomery's entire life slipped from the porter's hands and crashed onto the wooden platform of the Sweetwater Springs train station in the Wyoming Territory, spilling silk dresses and leather-bound books across the dusty planks, as if mocking every refined expectation she had carried with her from Boston on this sweltering July afternoon in 1882. Catherine stood frozen in her emerald traveling suit, watching fellow passengers step around her belongings with barely concealed curiosity. The journey west had taken 6 grueling days, and she had sustained herself through every uncomfortable mile by imagining the grand estate that surely awaited her. Harrison Caldwell's letters had spoken of his successful ranch, his prominent position in the community, and his desire for a cultured wife to share his prosperity. He had written with such eloquence about the opportunities in Wyoming, about building an empire in this wild land, about creating a legacy. Never once had he mentioned the specifics of his home, but Catherine, raised in her grandmother's Boston mansion overlooking the Common, had filled in those blanks with her own hopeful assumptions. "Miss Montgomery," a deep voice cut through her spiral of anxiety. Catherine looked up to find a man approaching, and her breath caught for reasons that had nothing to do with her expectations being met or shattered. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with sun-bronzed skin that spoke of endless days outdoors. Dark hair curled slightly at the collar of his worn chambray shirt, and his eyes were the color of warm honey in the afternoon light. He moved with an easy confidence, his dusty boots barely making a sound on the platform despite his size. This could not be Harrison Caldwell. This man looked nothing like the daguerreotype she had received, which had shown a portly gentleman with thinning hair and a carefully groomed mustache. "I am Catherine Montgomery," she confirmed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Are you here on behalf of Mr. Caldwell?" The man's expression shifted, something uncomfortable crossing his features. He removed his hat, revealing more of that dark hair, slightly damp with sweat from the July heat. "I am Harrison Caldwell, Miss Montgomery. I apologize for the confusion. The photograph I sent was taken some years ago, and I have changed considerably since then." Catherine's mind raced. This was impossible. The man in the photograph had appeared at least 50 years old. This man before her could not be more than 30. "Some years ago," she repeated, her tone sharper than she intended. A flush crept up Harrison's neck. "I borrowed my uncle's photograph," he admitted, meeting her eyes with what appeared to be genuine remorse. "I was afraid that if I sent my own, you would think me too young, too unestablished. I wanted you to believe I was a man of substance and security." The heat of the Wyoming afternoon suddenly felt oppressive. Catherine swayed slightly, and Harrison immediately reached out to steady her, his hand warm and solid on her elbow. "Perhaps we should get you out of this sun," he said quickly. "The hotel has a dining room where we can talk properly." The hotel. Catherine pulled her arm away, though she immediately missed the steadiness of his touch. "Am I not going directly to your home?" Harrison's jaw tightened. "Miss Montgomery, there are several things we need to discuss before we make any decisions about our arrangement. Please, let me gather your belongings and we can speak somewhere more comfortable." The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of activity. Harrison proved surprisingly efficient, collecting every scattered item from her trunk with care, even her most intimate garments, which he handled with respectful discretion. He arranged for her larger luggage to be stored at the station and led her down the main street of Sweetwater Springs with her smaller case in hand. The town was nothing like Boston. The buildings were mostly wooden, many appearing hastily constructed, and the street was unpaved dirt that had been churned into a fine dust by countless horses and wagon wheels. Men in dusty work clothes far outnumbered the few women Catherine spotted, and those women wore practical calico and homespun rather than the fashionable silks Catherine had packed so carefully. A saloon's doors swung open, releasing a wave of raucous laughter and the smell of whiskey into the afternoon air. Across the street, a general store advertised supplies for miners and ranchers. Everything felt raw, unfinished, as if civilization had only the most tenuous grip on this place. The hotel was a two-story structure that looked more substantial than many of the surrounding buildings, at least. Harrison held the door for her, and they entered a small lobby that was blessedly cooler than the street. The proprietor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and capable hands, greeted Harrison by name. "Mrs. Hendricks, this is Miss Montgomery from Boston," Harrison said. "She will need a room, and we would like to take supper in the dining room if that is possible." Mrs. Hendricks assessed Catherine with a single sweeping glance that seemed to take in everything from her expensive clothes to her current state of distress. "Of course, Harrison." "Miss Montgomery, welcome to Sweetwater Springs. Let me show you to a room where you can freshen up, and I will have some cool water and a basin sent up immediately. Supper will be ready in an hour." The room Mrs. Hendricks led her to was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered in a simple quilt, a washstand, and a single chair by the window. It was nothing like the spacious bedroom Catherine had occupied in her grandmother's house, with its four-poster bed and heavy velvet curtains, but it would suffice for the moment. Catherine sank onto the chair as soon as Mrs. Hendricks departed, her legs suddenly unable to support her. What had she done? She had left everything familiar, had traveled 2,000 miles based on letters from a man who had lied about his very appearance. Her grandmother had passed away 6 months earlier, leaving Catherine alone in that big house with creditors circling like vultures. The debts her father had accumulated before his death years ago had finally come due, and Catherine had been faced with a choice. Marry one of the elderly gentlemen her grandmother's lawyer had suggested, men who would pay off the debts in exchange for a young wife, or find another solution. Harrison Caldwell's advertisement for a mail-order bride had seemed like providence. A successful rancher seeking a cultured, educated woman to share his life. The letters that followed had been intelligent, thoughtful, and respectful. Catherine had allowed herself to hope for something more than a mercenary transaction, had even allowed herself to dream of affection, perhaps eventually love. And now she discovered it had all been built on deception. A knock at the door roused her from her spiraling thoughts. A young girl entered with a pitcher of water and a basin, along with fresh towels. "Mrs. Hendricks said you might want these, miss," the girl said shyly. "She also said to tell you there is no rush for supper. You take your time." Catherine thanked her and, once alone, poured the cool water into the basin. She removed her hat and gloves, unbuttoned the high collar of her traveling suit, and washed her face and hands. The water was wonderfully cool, and she took her time, trying to compose herself. She studied her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. Blue eyes stared back at her, wide with uncertainty. Her blonde hair, carefully pinned that morning, had come loose in several places. She looked young, frightened, and utterly out of place. But Catherine had not survived her father's disgrace, her grandmother's decline, and the loss of everything familiar only to fall apart now. She straightened her spine, repinned her hair, and buttoned her collar. Whatever conversation awaited her downstairs, she would face it with dignity. Harrison rose immediately when she entered the dining room. He had cleaned up as well, she noticed. His hair was damp and neatly combed, and he had changed into a clean shirt, though it was still simple work clothing rather than the fine suits Boston gentlemen wore. He held her chair for her, his manners impeccable despite his rough appearance. Mrs. Hendricks brought them coffee and promised supper shortly. Then they were alone, separated by a small table and a vast gulf of unspoken truths. "I owe you a full explanation," Harrison began without preamble. "And an apology that I know cannot undo the deception." Catherine wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, grateful for something to hold. "I would appreciate the truth, Mr. Caldwell." Harrison took a breath. "I am 28 years old. I own a ranch about 5 miles outside of town, but it is not the grand estate you were likely imagining. I have a small house, barely more than a cabin really, with 2 rooms. I have been working the land for 3 years, building my herd, and I am making progress, but slowly. I am not poor, Miss Montgomery, but neither am I wealthy. I live simply because every spare dollar goes back into the ranch." Catherine's stomach tightened. "The letters spoke of your successful operation, your position in the community." "I do not deny I exaggerated," Harrison said, meeting her eyes directly. "My ranch is successful in that it supports me and has potential for growth. My position in the community is that of any hardworking man who pays his debts and helps his neighbors. But I led you to believe something far grander, and for that I am deeply sorry." "Why?" Catherine asked, the word emerging more as an accusation than a question. "Why the deception? Why not simply be honest about your circumstances?" Harrison's jaw worked for a moment. "Because I was afraid no woman would come. I have been alone since I came here, Miss Montgomery. This land is beautiful but harsh. The work is endless. The winters are brutal and the summers are unforgiving. I wanted a partner, someone to share this life with, someone who could see the potential in what I am building. But I also wanted someone educated, someone who could bring culture and refinement to balance the roughness. I knew such a woman would have options, would have no reason to choose a poor cowboy struggling to build something from nothing. So I presented myself as more than I am." "You presented yourself as someone else entirely," Catherine corrected, her voice cold. "That photograph was of a man twice your age." "My uncle," Harrison admitted. "He built a successful freight company in Denver. I thought if you believed I had his maturity, his established success, you would feel secure in coming." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I know I have no right to ask for your understanding. You have every right to turn around and take the next train back to Boston. I will pay for your ticket and give you money for your trouble. But I am asking you to at least see my ranch before you decide. Give me a chance to show you what I can offer, even if it is not what you expected." Mrs. Hendricks arrived with their supper. Plates of roasted chicken, potatoes, and green beans that actually smelled wonderful. Catherine realized she had barely eaten during the train journey, too nervous and excited about her arrival. They ate in silence for several minutes, and Catherine used the time to think. She could return to Boston, but to what? The house was gone, sold to pay debts. Her grandmother's friends had been sympathetic but ultimately unhelpful. The elderly suitors her lawyer had suggested were unappealing at best. She had burned those bridges when she had declined their offers and announced her intention to marry a rancher in Wyoming. She had no family left, no fortune, no prospects. Or she could stay and see what Harrison Caldwell was truly offering. The man across from her had lied, yes, but he had also been honest once confronted. He had offered her an escape, funding for her return with no demands. That suggested a certain integrity, however belated. And she could not deny that something in her had responded to him on that train platform before she knew who he was, before disappointment had set in. He was handsome in a way that had nothing to do with fashion or refinement, and everything to do with strength and capability. His hands, wrapped around his coffee cup, were calloused from hard work but moved with surprising grace. "Tell me about your ranch," Catherine said finally, the truth this time. Relief flickered across Harrison's face. "I have 200 acres in a valley about 5 miles north of town. There is a creek that runs through the property year-round, which is precious in this dry country. I have about 50 head of cattle currently, though I am hoping to double that by next year. I have 2 horses, both good working animals. The house is small, as I said, but it is solidly built. I constructed it myself with help from my neighbors. There is a main room with a kitchen area and a fireplace, and a separate bedroom. If you were to stay, I would give you the bedroom and sleep in the main room until we decided how to proceed with our arrangement. And what did you envision for this arrangement? Catherine asked carefully. Harrison's gaze was steady. I was hoping for a marriage, Miss Montgomery, a true partnership. I need a wife who can help build something lasting, who can eventually help me raise children if we are so blessed. I want someone to share my life with, not just someone to cook and clean. I want conversation in the evenings, someone to face the difficulties with, someone to celebrate the victories with. I want what my parents had before they passed, a real love built on mutual respect and shared dreams. But you cannot offer me the comfort and security I was expecting, Catherine said. No, Harrison agreed. I cannot offer you a mansion or servants or fine dresses. I can offer you honest work, a home I will continue to improve, a share in everything I build, and my absolute loyalty and respect. I can promise you I will never lie to you again. And I can offer you freedom, Miss Montgomery. The West is hard, but it is also a place where people can reinvent themselves, where your past matters less than your character. That is worth something, is it not? Catherine looked down at her plate. Everything he said resonated with a truth she had been avoiding. Boston had become a cage, its rigid social structures and unforgiving judgment of her family's financial ruin suffocating her. Here, no one knew about her father's debts or her grandmother's dwindling fortune. Here, she could be simply Catherine, not the impoverished granddaughter of a once prominent family. I want to see the ranch, she said finally. Tomorrow, in the daylight, I want to see exactly what you are offering before I make any decision. Harrison nodded. That is more than fair. I will come for you at 9 o'clock if that suits you. The ride will take about an hour. They finished their meal with less tension, and Harrison even coaxed a small smile from Catherine by describing some of the characters who populated Sweetwater Springs. There was Doc Thornton, who had been a battlefield surgeon during the war and now tended to everything from gunshot wounds to difficult births with equal competence. There was Samuel Chen, who ran a restaurant that served the best dumplings anyone had ever tasted and who had come to build the railroad and stayed to build a business. There was Reverend Matthews and his wife, who ran the small church and the even smaller school, teaching any child whose parents would spare them from work long enough to learn reading and arithmetic. It was a community, Catherine realized. Small, rough around the edges, but a community nonetheless. And Harrison spoke of these people with genuine warmth, suggesting he was well-liked and integrated into the social fabric of the town. When they parted for the evening, Harrison took her hand briefly. His palm was warm and rough against her gloved fingers. Thank you for giving me a chance, Miss Montgomery. I know I do not deserve it. Catherine lay awake for a long time that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the frontier town. Horses moving in the street, occasional shouts from the saloon, the distant howl of a coyote. Everything was strange and unsettling, but it was also, in some inexplicable way, full of possibility. Harrison arrived precisely at 9 o'clock the next morning. Catherine had dressed in her most practical outfit, a simple blue cotton dress that was far less elaborate than her traveling suit. She had also gone to the general store earlier that morning, using some of her dwindling funds to purchase a wide-brimmed hat that would protect her from the sun. Mrs. Hendricks had packed them a lunch basket, waving away Catherine's attempt to pay. "You just bring back that basket when you are done," the older woman had said with a knowing smile. "And remember, dear, sometimes the best things in life are not the ones we planned for." Harrison helped Catherine into the wagon, which was sturdy but clearly designed for work rather than comfort. His horse, a rangy bay mare, was tied to the back. They set off through the town and then out into open country, following a well-worn trail that led north. The landscape was unlike anything Catherine had ever seen. Rolling grasslands stretched in every direction, interrupted occasionally by rocky outcroppings and stands of cottonwood trees. The sky was impossibly vast, a dome of brilliant blue unmarred by clouds. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still holding snow despite the July heat. The air smelled of sage and grass and something wild that Catherine could not name. "It is beautiful," she admitted, almost against her will. Harrison glanced at her, pleasure evident in his expression. "It is. Some people find it too empty, too harsh, but I think it is the most beautiful place I have ever seen. Every season brings something different. In the spring, wildflowers carpet the grasslands. In the fall, the cottonwoods turn gold. And in the winter, when the snow covers everything, it is like living in a painting." "You speak like a poet, Mr. Caldwell." "Harrison," he corrected gently. "If we are to spend the day together, let us at least use our given names. And I am no poet, but this land does something to a person. It demands honesty. There is no room for pretense when you are facing a blizzard or a drought. You learn what matters." They rode in companionable silence for a while. Catherine found herself relaxing despite her intentions to remain skeptical. There was something peaceful about the vast openness, something that eased the constant tension she had carried for months in Boston. "Why did you come west?" Catherine asked eventually. "You speak with education. You could have had opportunities in the east." Harrison's hands moved easily on the reins, guiding the horses along the trail. "My family had a farm in Ohio. Good land, established. My older brother inherited it when my father passed, which is as it should be. But I wanted something of my own, not just a position working my brother's land. I had read about the opportunities in the Wyoming territory, about the Homestead Act and open range for cattle. 3 years ago, I scraped together everything I had, bought some basic supplies and a few head of cattle, and came here to file my claim. It has been harder than I imagined, but also more rewarding. Everything I have, I built with my own hands. That means something." There was pride in his voice, not arrogance but earned satisfaction. Catherine found herself respecting that. "And you decided you needed a wife to make it complete." "I decided I was lonely," Harrison said simply. "I can handle the work. I can handle the isolation during the day when there is so much to do. But the evenings are long and the winters are longer. I wanted someone to share it all with. Is that so wrong?" "No," Catherine admitted, "but the deception was wrong." "I know," Harrison said quietly. "I will regret that for a long time." They crested a rise and Harrison pulled the wagon to a stop. "There," he said, pointing to the valley below. Catherine looked, and her heart sank even as something in her chest tightened with unexpected emotion. The valley was beautiful, green with summer grass and bisected by a sparkling creek lined with trees. Cattle grazed peacefully in the distance, and there, near the creek, stood a small log cabin. It was tiny, perhaps 20 feet on each side, with a stone chimney rising from one end and a small covered porch across the front. A vegetable garden, neatly fenced, grew beside the house. A modest barn stood nearby, along with a corral holding 2 horses. It was not a mansion. It was not even a proper house by Boston standards. But it sat in that valley like it belonged there, solid and unpretentious and somehow right. "That is my home," Harrison said, and there was vulnerability in his voice. "That is what I am offering you." Catherine could not speak for a moment. This was so far from what she had imagined, from what she had hoped for. And yet, looking at that small cabin in its beautiful valley, she felt something shift inside her. This was honest. This was real. There was no pretense here, no false grandeur. Just a man who had built something with his own hands and was willing to share it. "Let us go down," she said softly. Harrison drove the wagon down into the valley and pulled up in front of the cabin. He helped Catherine down, his hands steady at her waist, and she became suddenly aware of his strength, his nearness. Their eyes met for a moment, and Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the Wyoming sun. Harrison showed her around with obvious pride mixed with apprehension. The cabin's main room was indeed small, but it was clean and well organized. There was a stone fireplace with a cooking crane, a sturdy table with 2 chairs, shelves holding supplies and a few books, and a narrow bed against one wall. A door led to the second room, which held only a slightly larger bed and a trunk for storage. The floors were wood, carefully fitted, and the windows, though few, let in good light. "I know it is not much," Harrison said, "but the roof does not leak and the walls keep out the wind. I have plans to add on maybe another room or 2 when I can afford the materials." Catherine walked around slowly, taking it all in. She noticed small details: wildflowers in a jar on the table clearly picked that morning, curtains on the windows, simple but clean. Everything was orderly, cared for. This was not the dwelling of a careless man. Outside, Harrison showed her the garden, where tomatoes, beans, squash, and other vegetables grew in neat rows. "I do what I can, but honestly, I am not much of a gardener," he admitted. "My mother had the talent for it. I managed to keep things alive, but barely." The barn was small but well constructed, with room for the 2 horses and storage for hay and tack. Beyond it, the grassland rolled away toward the creek, and Catherine could see cattle grazing in the distance. "How do you manage it all alone?" Catherine asked. "With difficulty," Harrison admitted with a slight smile. "During spring roundup and fall branding, neighbors help each other. We work together, moving from ranch to ranch until everyone's herd is handled. The rest of the time, it is just me. I am up before dawn and rarely finish before dark." "But I am building something, Catherine. Slowly, yes, but steadily. In 5 years, this ranch could support a family comfortably. In 10, it could be something truly substantial." They walked down to the creek, following a well-worn path. The water ran clear and cold over smooth stones, and the cottonwood trees provided welcome shade. Harrison spread a blanket in the shade, and they unpacked Mrs. Hendricks's lunch basket, which proved to contain sandwiches, apples, and generous slices of pie. As they ate, Catherine found herself watching Harrison. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of hard physical labor, but there was also a gentleness in how he handled things, a carefulness. He noticed her watching and met her gaze steadily. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Catherine considered the question. "I am thinking that everything in my life has fallen apart in the past year. My grandmother was the last stable thing I had, and when she died, I discovered there was nothing left. The house, the possessions, even the reputation, all of it was either gone or tarnished. I thought coming here would be a way to reclaim some security, some status. I imagined myself as the wife of a prosperous rancher, presiding over a fine home, being someone of importance again." Harrison's expression was sympathetic but not pitying. "And instead, you find yourself eating sandwiches by a creek with a cowboy who lied to you." "Yes," Catherine agreed. Then, surprising herself, she smiled. "But the strange thing is, I am not as devastated as I should be. This is beautiful, Harrison. What you have built here is real and honest. And I think perhaps that is worth more than I realized." Hope flickered in Harrison's eyes. "Does that mean you are considering staying?" Catherine took a deep breath. "I need to understand what you are proposing. You mentioned marriage, but we are strangers to each other. How would this work?" Harrison set down his sandwich and turned to face her fully. "I would propose we marry legally, but give ourselves time to truly know each other. As I said, you would have the bedroom, and I would sleep in the main room. We would work together on the ranch, share meals, spend our evenings talking. We would court each other, essentially, but with the security of marriage already in place. If, after some time, we find we cannot make it work, I would help you relocate wherever you wished. But if we find, as I hope we might, that we are well suited, then we could truly become husband and wife in every sense. That is highly unconventional, Catherine said. This is the frontier, Harrison replied with a slight smile. Conventional does not always apply. I want you to feel safe, Catherine. I want you to have time to decide if I am what you can accept. I am asking for a chance, not demanding a commitment you are not ready to give. Catherine looked out at the valley, at the cattle grazing peacefully, at the cabin sitting solid and welcoming near the creek. She thought about returning to Boston, about the emptiness waiting for her there. She thought about the alternative suitors she had fled, old men who wanted a young wife to tend them in their declining years. And she thought about the man sitting beside her, who had lied but was now offering her more honesty and respect than anyone in Boston had. If I agree, Catherine said slowly, I will expect absolute honesty from here forward. No more deceptions, no more exaggerations. I will need to know exactly what our financial situation is, what challenges we face, everything. You have my word, Harrison said immediately, and I will need time, as you said. I cannot promise to fall in love with you or even to like you, but I will promise to try to give this an honest effort. That is all I ask. Catherine took another deep breath. Then yes, Harrison Caldwell, I will marry you and give us both a chance to see if we can build something together. The relief and joy that flooded Harrison's face was almost overwhelming. He reached for her hand, and this time Catherine let him take it, feeling the rough calluses against her palm, the warmth and strength of his grip. Thank you, he said quietly. I will do everything in my power to make you happy here, Catherine. I know I cannot give you luxury, but I can give you loyalty and partnership and, I hope, affection. They sat by the creek for another hour, talking about practical matters. They would marry as soon as arrangements could be made, probably within a week. Catherine would need different clothes, practical things suitable for ranch work. Harrison had some money saved that he had intended for buying more cattle, but he insisted she use it for whatever she needed to set up their home properly. The cattle can wait, he said firmly. You are more important. As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, they packed up the lunch remains and walked back to the wagon. Before Harrison helped Catherine up, he paused, still holding her hand. I know this is not what you dreamed of, he said softly. But I promise you, Catherine, I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it better than you dreamed. Something in Catherine's chest tightened at the sincerity in his voice, at the hope in his eyes. She had come west expecting a mansion and security. Instead, she had found a small cabin and an honest man. Perhaps, she thought as Harrison helped her into the wagon, that might be enough. Perhaps it might even be more. The ride back to town seemed shorter. They talked more easily now, Harrison telling her about the neighbors she would meet, about the social life such as it was in Sweetwater Springs. There were barn dances occasionally, church socials, quilting bees for the women. It was not Boston society, but it was community. When they reached the hotel, Harrison helped Catherine down from the wagon. I will speak with Reverend Matthews tomorrow and make arrangements, he said, and I will let the community know. People will want to meet you to welcome you properly. I am not sure I am ready for scrutiny, Catherine admitted. They will love you, Harrison said with confidence. You are brave and honest, and that is what matters here. That night, Catherine wrote a letter to her grandmother's lawyer, informing him of her impending marriage and asking him to forward any remaining possessions that had not been sold. She wrote with a strange sense of peace, as if a weight had lifted. She had made her choice, and whatever came next, she would face it. The next few days passed in a flurry of activity. Reverend Matthews agreed to perform the ceremony on Saturday, giving Catherine 5 days to prepare. Mrs. Hendricks, upon hearing the news, became a whirlwind of helpful energy. She took Catherine to meet the town seamstress, Mrs. O'Brien, who outfitted her with several practical dresses suitable for ranch work as well as one nicer dress for the wedding. "Nothing too fancy," Catherine insisted. "This is not that kind of wedding. But you still want to feel pretty, Mrs." O'Brien said firmly, and set to work altering a simple cream-colored dress with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Catherine also met Harrison's neighbors, who came to town specifically to make her acquaintance. Tom and Sarah Mitchell had the ranch to the east of Harrison's property. They were in their 40s, weathered and capable, with 3 half-grown children. Sarah embraced Catherine like a long-lost daughter. "Harrison is a good man," Sarah told her earnestly. "He has helped us countless times, never asking for anything in return. You are getting one of the finest men in the territory." James Cooper, who had the ranch to the west, was a gruff older man who had lost his wife 2 years earlier. "Your young man worked beside me for 3 weeks when I was laid up with a broken leg," he told Catherine. "Fed my stock, repaired my fences, refused any payment." That tells you what you need to know about his character. These testimonials meant more to Catherine than she had expected. In Boston, people spoke carefully, always aware of social positioning and hidden agendas. Here, people seemed to say what they meant, and their respect for Harrison appeared genuine. Harrison himself came to town each day, always finding excuses to spend time with Catherine. He took her to Samuel Chen's restaurant, where they ate dumplings and noodles that were indeed the best Catherine had ever tasted. He introduced her to Doc Thornton, a gruff man with kind eyes who looked her over and declared her healthy enough for ranch life. He showed her the small church where they would marry, a simple wooden building with a handmade altar and benches that seated perhaps 50 people. With each day, Catherine felt her nervousness easing and something else growing in its place. She caught herself watching Harrison, admiring the way he moved, the way he interacted with people. He was unfailingly polite but also genuine, treating the Chinese restaurant owner with the same respect he showed the banker. He had a quiet sense of humor that emerged in unexpected moments, making her laugh. And when he looked at her, which was often, there was such hope and warmth in his gaze that it made her heart race. On Friday evening, the night before the wedding, Harrison asked Catherine to take a walk with him. They strolled through the town as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. "Are you frightened?" Harrison asked quietly. "Terrified," Catherine admitted. "But also strangely excited. Is that foolish?" "No," Harrison said. "I feel the same way. Catherine, I want you to know that if you change your mind, even at the last minute, I will understand. This is a huge step, and I do not want you to feel trapped." Catherine stopped walking and turned to face him. "I am not going to change my mind. I made a promise and I intend to keep it." "But Harrison, I need you to understand that I cannot promise you love. Not yet. I barely know you." Harrison reached up and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers barely grazing her cheek. The touch sent an unexpected shiver through Catherine. "I am not asking for love yet," he said softly. "I am asking for time and patience and the chance to earn it. That is all." Catherine found herself leaning slightly into his touch before catching herself. "You may regret taking on a Boston woman who knows nothing about ranching." Harrison smiled. "And you may regret taking on a cowboy who cannot dance properly and has calluses that snag on fine fabric. But we will figure it out together." They stood close in the gathering darkness, and Catherine felt the pull between them, a magnetic awareness that had been growing all week. For a moment, she thought Harrison might kiss her, and she was surprised by how much she wanted him to. But he simply took her hand and brought it briefly to his lips before stepping back. "Tomorrow," he said quietly. "Tomorrow we start our life together. Get some rest, Catherine." The wedding took place at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning. Catherine wore the cream dress Mrs. O'Brien had altered, and Mrs. Hendricks had woven wildflowers into her hair. She carried a simple bouquet of more wildflowers that Sarah Mitchell had picked that morning. As Catherine walked down the short aisle of the church, she saw that it was nearly full. The entire community seemed to have turned out for Harrison's wedding. But she had eyes only for the man waiting at the altar. Harrison wore new clothes, probably purchased especially for this occasion. Dark trousers, a white shirt, a vest, and a string tie. His hair was neatly combed and he had shaved carefully. He looked nervous and hopeful and impossibly handsome. The ceremony was simple. Reverend Matthews spoke about partnership and commitment, about building a life together through hard work and faith. Catherine and Harrison exchanged vows that were traditional but felt weighted with meaning. When Harrison slipped a simple gold band on her finger, his hands trembled slightly. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Matthews announced. Harrison hesitated, his eyes searching Catherine's face. She gave him a small nod and he leaned in, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle and brief, but sent warmth flooding through her entire body. When they pulled apart, Catherine saw her own surprise reflected in Harrison's eyes. Whatever spark existed between them, it was mutual and undeniable. The community hosted a celebration dinner at the hotel, with everyone bringing food and well wishes. There was music and dancing, and Harrison proved his earlier words correct when he attempted to waltz with Catherine and nearly tripped over his own feet. "I warned you," he said with a laugh, steadying himself. "You did," Catherine agreed, but she was laughing too, and it felt wonderful. As afternoon turned to evening, Harrison leaned close and murmured, "Are you ready to go home, home?" The word sent a thrill and a wave of nervousness through Catherine. "Yes," she said, "I am ready." The ride back to the ranch in the golden light of early evening felt different now. Catherine was no longer a visitor evaluating a possibility. She was Harrison's wife, heading to her new home. The reality of it was both thrilling and terrifying. Harrison must have sensed her nervousness because he reached over and took her hand. "Remember, no expectations," he said quietly. "We take this at whatever pace feels right." When they arrived at the cabin, Harrison helped Catherine down from the wagon and then, to her surprise, swept her up into his arms. "Tradition," he said with a slight smile, carrying her over the threshold. Inside, Catherine saw that the cabin had been transformed. Fresh wildflowers filled jars on every surface. The table was set for two, and something smelled wonderful from the pot hanging over the fire. The bedroom door stood open, revealing that the bed had been made up with a beautiful quilt that Catherine recognized as Sarah Mitchell's handiwork. Harrison set Catherine down gently. "The ladies insisted on helping me prepare," he admitted. "I think they took pity on my complete lack of domestic skills. There is stew for supper, bread that Mrs. O'Brien baked this morning, and apparently pie for dessert." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes at the kindness, at the effort Harrison and the community had made to welcome her. "It is perfect," she said softly. They ate supper together as the light faded outside. The stew was hearty and good, the bread fresh, the pie delicious. They talked quietly, the conversation flowing easily. Harrison told her about his plans for the ranch, about wanting to improve the irrigation from the creek, about hoping to buy a milk cow so they could have fresh dairy. "I want your input on everything," he said. "This is your home now, Catherine, your ranch as much as mine. If you have ideas or want to change things, tell me." After supper, Catherine insisted on washing the dishes while Harrison banked the fire. The simple domesticity felt strange and comfortable all at once. This was her life now, washing dishes in a small cabin in Wyoming, married to a man she had known for less than a week. When the kitchen chores were done, an awkward silence fell. They both knew the evening was ending and decisions would need to be made. Harrison cleared his throat. "I will get some blankets and make up my bed here by the fire," he said. "You take the bedroom. There is a bolt on the inside of the door if that would make you feel more secure." Catherine looked at him, at this man who had promised her time and patience. "That will not be necessary," she said. "I trust you, Harrison." The gratitude in his eyes was profound. "That means more than you know. Good night, Catherine. Sleep well." Catherine retreated to the bedroom, her heart pounding. She changed into her nightgown, brushed out her hair, and climbed into the bed. It was comfortable, the quilts soft and warm. But she lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the man sleeping just beyond that door. She had married him. She was Harrison Caldwell now, no longer Catherine Montgomery. Everything familiar was gone, replaced by this new, uncertain, terrifying, exhilarating life. From the main room, she heard Harrison moving quietly, settling down for the night. And Catherine realized, with some surprise, that she felt safe. For all her uncertainty about the future, about whether she could build a life here, she felt fundamentally safe in a way she had not felt since her grandmother's death. That would have to be enough for now. The rest, affection and partnership and possibly even love, would come or it would not. But they had made a start, and that was something. Catherine woke to the sound of someone moving quietly in the main room. Gray dawn light filtered through the small window, and for a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was. Then memory flooded back. Wyoming, the ranch, Harrison. She rose, dressed quickly in one of her new practical dresses, and opened the bedroom door. Harrison was at the stove, working on breakfast. He turned when he heard her, a smile breaking across his face. "Good morning, Mrs. Caldwell," he said, and the name sent a flutter through Catherine's stomach. "I hope I did not wake you." "I tried to be quiet." "What time is it?" Catherine asked. "Just past 5, Harrison said. "I am usually up at 4:30, but I let myself sleep in this morning. Coffee." Catherine accepted the cup he poured, savoring the strong, hot beverage. "Do you always wake this early?" "Cattle do not care about sleeping in," Harrison said with a slight smile. "But this morning I thought I would make us breakfast before I head out. We have bacon, eggs from the Mitchell's chickens, and more of Mrs. O'Brien's bread." They ate together as the sun rose, and Harrison explained his plans for the day. He needed to check on the cattle, repair some fence line that had been damaged, and if time permitted, start cutting hay for winter storage. "Can I help?" Catherine asked. Harrison looked surprised. "You do not have to, Catherine. Getting settled, arranging the house however you like, that is work enough." "I want to learn," Catherine insisted. "You said this is my ranch too. I need to understand how it works, what needs to be done. I am not afraid of hard work, Harrison. I just do not know ranch work yet." Pride shone in Harrison's eyes. "Then yes, you can absolutely help. Let me show you how to saddle a horse." The next hour was a revelation. Catherine had ridden in Boston, sedate trips through parks on gentle mares. This was entirely different. Harrison's horses were working animals, larger and stronger. He showed her how to brush them down, how to lift the heavy saddle, how to cinch it properly. "Too loose and you will slide off," he explained. "Too tight and you hurt the horse. It takes practice to get it just right." Catherine's arms ached from lifting the saddle, but she managed it. Harrison helped her mount, adjusting her stirrups, and then swung easily onto his own horse. They rode out into the morning, which was cool and beautiful. The grass sparkled with dew, and meadowlarks sang from fence posts. Harrison showed her the boundaries of their property, pointed out where he wanted to eventually build a larger barn, explained his system for rotating the cattle through different pastures to prevent overgrazing. Catherine listened intently, asking questions, trying to absorb everything. The scale of the work was daunting. How did one person manage all of this? But as they rode, she began to see the patterns, the rhythms Harrison had established. They found the damaged fence mid-morning, several posts knocked down, probably by cattle scratching against them. Harrison dismounted and began the repair work, using tools he had brought in his saddlebags. Catherine watched for a while, then dismounted herself. "What can I do?" she asked. "Hold this post steady while I tamp the dirt around it," Harrison directed. It was hot, dusty work. Catherine's hands were unused to it and she could feel blisters forming. But she did not complain, holding posts while Harrison anchored them, handing him tools when he needed them. They worked in companionable silence, the only sounds their breathing and the thud of Harrison's post hammer. When the fence was repaired, Harrison straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead. He noticed Catherine flexing her hands and immediately took them in his own, turning them over to reveal the red marks that would soon become blisters. "We should have gotten you gloves," he said, concern evident in his voice. "I am fine," Catherine assured him. "You are tougher than you look," Harrison said, and there was admiration in his tone. They rode back to the cabin for a late lunch, and Catherine insisted on preparing it despite her sore hands. She found bread, cheese, and dried beef in the stores and put together a simple meal. As they ate, Harrison told her more about the neighbors, about the cattle market, about his hopes and plans. "I have been thinking," Harrison said. "If you want, we could use some of the furniture money to buy supplies for you to start a proper garden. Maybe get some chickens of our own, and definitely a milk cow. Those things would make our life here more comfortable and give us products to sell or trade in town." "I know nothing about chickens or milk cows," Catherine admitted. "Sarah Mitchell will teach you," Harrison said confidently. "She knows everything about homesteading, and I will help when I can. We will figure it out together, Catherine. That is how this works." That evening, after another day of hard work, they sat together on the porch as the sun set. Catherine's entire body ached in ways she had never experienced, but there was also a sense of satisfaction. She had helped today. She had contributed. Harrison sat beside her, close but not touching, both of them watching the colors spread across the sky. "You did well today," Harrison said quietly. "I know it was hard, all of it so different from what you are used to, but you did not complain once." "I was raised to believe that hard work has dignity," Catherine said. "My grandmother, for all her social pretensions, actually taught me that. She may have valued appearances, but she also valued capability. I am not afraid to work, Harrison. I am only afraid of failing." Harrison turned to look at her. "You could not possibly fail. Just trying, just being here, that already makes you braver than most." Their eyes met, and Catherine felt that pull again, that magnetic draw. Harrison's hand moved toward hers, then hesitated. Catherine made the decision for him, reaching out and lacing her fingers through his. His hand was warm, calloused, strong, and it felt exactly right. They sat like that until the stars came out, hand in hand, watching the night settle over their valley. It was not love, not yet, but it was something, a beginning, a possibility. And for now, that was enough. The days turned into weeks, and a rhythm established itself. Catherine learned quickly, driven by determination, and aided by Harrison's patient teaching and the generous help of their neighbors. Sarah Mitchell became a regular visitor, showing Catherine how to care for the chickens they bought, how to milk the cow Harrison acquired from James Cooper, how to make butter and cheese. Mrs. O'Brien taught her to bake bread that did not turn into bricks. Doc Thornton's wife, Emma, showed her which wild plants were edible and which were medicinal. The work was endless and exhausting. Catherine rose before dawn with Harrison and often did not stop until after dark. Her hands, once soft and carefully tended, became calloused and strong. Her skin tanned, despite her best efforts with bonnets. Her body grew lean and muscular from the constant physical labor, but something else was happening too. With each shared meal, each evening spent talking by lamplight, each morning working side by side, Catherine felt herself drawing closer to Harrison. She learned his habits, his preferences, his dreams. She learned that he had a wry sense of humor that emerged when he was relaxed. She learned that he sang quietly to himself when he worked alone, usually old hymns his mother had taught him. She learned that he was unfailingly kind to her, to animals, to everyone they encountered. And she learned that she was attracted to him in ways that kept her awake at night. The sight of him working without his shirt in the summer heat, muscles moving under bronzed skin, made her mouth go dry. The sound of his voice, deep and warm, sent shivers through her. When he helped her down from the wagon or handed her tools, every brief touch seemed to carry an electric charge. Harrison seemed to feel it too. She caught him watching her sometimes, his gaze heated before he quickly looked away. His touches lingered a fraction longer than necessary. When they sat together in the evenings, the space between them seemed to grow smaller each night. But true to his word, Harrison never pushed, never demanded. They still slept separately, Catherine in the bedroom and Harrison on his pallet by the fireplace. It was both frustrating and comforting, this slow building of something real between them. In mid-August, the community held a barn dance at the Mitchell's ranch. Catherine wore one of her nicer dresses, and Harrison looked at her like she had hung the moon when she emerged from the bedroom. "You are beautiful," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made Catherine's heart race. The barn had been cleared and decorated with lanterns. A fiddle player, a guitarist, and a man with a harmonica provided music. It seemed everyone in the territory had turned out. Catherine met people she had only heard about, ranchers from farther out, townspeople she had not yet encountered. Harrison danced with her despite his self-professed lack of skill, and Catherine found she did not mind his occasional missteps. Being in his arms felt right, his hand warm on her waist, their bodies moving together to the music. Between dances, Catherine stood with Sarah Mitchell and some of the other women, fanning herself in the warm barn. She had been accepted by this community, she realized. They asked her advice on recipes, invited her to quilting bees, treated her as one of them. "You have been good for Harrison," Sarah said quietly, watching Harrison across the barn where he talked with Tom and some other ranchers. "He smiles more now, seems lighter somehow." "He has been good for me too," Catherine admitted. "This life, it is so different from what I knew, but I think I am happier here than I ever was in Boston." Sarah smiled knowingly. "And are you falling in love with that husband of yours?" Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I think I might be," she admitted softly. "Good," Sarah said with satisfaction. "Because he has been in love with you since the moment you stepped off that train. Anyone with eyes can see it," Catherine's heart stuttered. "He has never said so." "Harrison is a careful man," Sarah said. "He knows you needed time, but mark my words, girl, that man adores you." The ride home that night felt different, charged with new awareness. Harrison helped Catherine down from the wagon, and his hands lingered at her waist. They stood close in the moonlight, neither moving away. "Did you enjoy yourself?" Harrison asked, his voice rough. "Very much," Catherine said, looking up at him. "Harrison, Sarah said something tonight that made me think." "What did she say?" Catherine gathered her courage. "She said you have been in love with me. Is that true?" Harrison went still. "Would it frighten you if it was?" "No," Catherine said softly. "It would not frighten me." "Because I think I am falling in love with you too." Harrison's breath caught. "Catherine, I do not want you to feel pressured. We agreed to take time." "We have taken time," Catherine said. "Nearly 2 months. And in that time I have learned who you are, Harrison Caldwell. You are kind and patient and hardworking. You are honest to a fault. You make me laugh. You make me feel safe. And you make me feel things I did not know I could feel." Harrison reached up, cupping her face gently in his hands. I have loved you since that first moment on the train platform, he admitted. I know that sounds impossible, but it is true. And every day since, I have loved you more. Catherine, you have made this house a home. You have made my life complete. I know this is not the life you imagined, not the luxury you expected, but I swear to you, I will spend every day trying to make you happy. You already do, Catherine whispered. Harrison, I do not want to sleep separately anymore. I want to be your wife in every way. I want to truly start our life together. Harrison's eyes darkened with desire, but also with tenderness. Are you certain? There is no rush, Catherine. I am certain, Catherine said, rising on her toes to close the distance between them. This kiss was nothing like their brief wedding kiss. It was deep and hungry and full of 2 months of restrained desire. Harrison's arms wrapped around Catherine, pulling her close, and she melted into him, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair. They kissed until they were both breathless, until the air around them seemed to shimmer with heat. Harrison pulled back just far enough to rest his forehead against hers. Inside, he said roughly. Let us go inside. What followed was tender and passionate, a claiming and a surrendering on both sides. Harrison treated Catherine like something precious, learning every sound she made, every touch that made her gasp. And Catherine discovered depths of feeling and sensation she had never imagined, her body responding to Harrison's with an intensity that left her shaking. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the bedroom, the sheets damp with sweat, moonlight streaming through the window. Harrison traced patterns on Catherine's bare shoulder, his touch gentle. No regrets, he asked quietly. Catherine turned to face him, running her hand along his jaw, only that we waited so long. Harrison smiled and pulled her closer, tucking her against his side. We have all the time in the world now, he said softly. This is just the beginning, Catherine. She fell asleep in his arms, feeling completely safe and utterly content for the first time in years. The autumn brought new rhythms and new challenges. The cattle needed to be moved to winter pasture. The garden's harvest needed to be preserved for the long winter ahead. Wood needed to be cut and stacked for heating and cooking. Every day brought tasks that demanded attention, but Catherine and Harrison faced them as partners now, truly united. Catherine discovered that she had a talent for managing the household economy. She kept careful records of their expenses and income, finding ways to stretch their resources. She bartered her excess eggs and butter in town for supplies they could not produce themselves. She even helped Harrison with the ranch accounts, her education in mathematics proving unexpectedly useful. In October, Harrison announced that they had done well enough that year to buy another 20 head of cattle. If we can get through the winter without too much loss, we will be in excellent shape come spring, he said, his excitement evident. Catherine, we are actually building something here. In a few years, we might be able to add on to the house, maybe get some better furniture, things you deserve. I have everything I need, Catherine said honestly, as long as I have you. The first snow came in early November, transforming the valley into a white wonderland. Catherine stood on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, watching the fat flakes fall. Harrison came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. Welcome to a Wyoming winter, he said, his breath warm against her ear. It will get much worse than this before spring comes. I am not afraid, Catherine said, leaning into his embrace. We have shelter, food, firewood, and we have each other. Yes, Harrison agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. We have each other. The winter was indeed harsh. Snow piled high and temperatures plunged well below zero. There were days when Harrison could barely make it to the barn and back, when going to check on the cattle was genuinely dangerous. But Catherine and Harrison had prepared well, and the cabin stayed warm and cozy. They spent long evenings by the fire, Catherine reading aloud from Harrison's small collection of books or mending clothes while Harrison carved small wooden items or worked on tack that needed repair. It was during those long winter evenings that they truly learned each other. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Harrison told her about losing his parents, about the pain of leaving his brother, but also the exhilaration of striking out on his own. Catherine shared her grief over her grandmother, her shame about her father's financial failures, her terror when she had realized she had no options left in Boston. "I am glad you had no options," Harrison said one night, pulling her close on the narrow bench where they sat. "Because otherwise you might not have come here, and I would never have met you." "I am glad too," Catherine admitted. "Even though I was furious when I discovered your deception, even though I was terrified, this has been the best thing that ever happened to me." "You are the best thing, Harrison." On Christmas Eve, a break in the weather allowed Tom and Sarah Mitchell to make the trip to their ranch for a brief visit. They brought gifts: a beautiful hand-knit blanket from Sarah, a bottle of whiskey from Tom for Harrison, and toys for the children they hopefully would have someday. "We wanted to check on you too," Sarah said as they gathered around the table for the simple meal Catherine had prepared. "Make sure you had not gone completely mad from cabin fever." "We are managing quite well," Catherine assured her with a smile. Sarah gave her a knowing look. "I can see that. You are positively glowing, dear." "Harrison, you have been taking good care of our girl." Harrison reached across the table and took Catherine's hand. "She takes care of me just as much," he said. "I could not ask for a better partner." That night, after the Mitchells had departed and the cabin was quiet again, Harrison gave Catherine his Christmas gift. It was a small wooden box he had carved during those long evenings, the lid decorated with an intricate pattern of flowers and vines. "It is for your letters and special things," he explained. "I know it is not fancy, but I wanted to make you something with my own hands." Catherine traced the delicate carving, tears pricking her eyes. "It is beautiful, Harrison. The most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me." Her gift to him was a new shirt she had sewn, using fabric she had purchased with her egg money. It was not as fine as the shirts he could have bought in a city, but she had put hours of work into it, making every stitch as perfect as she could. Harrison held the shirt like it was made of gold. "You made this for me. I wanted you to have something special," Catherine said, "something made just for you." Harrison set the shirt aside carefully and pulled Catherine into his arms. "I love you," he said fiercely. "More than I ever thought it was possible to love another person. You are everything to me, Catherine." "And you are everything to me," Catherine whispered back, holding him tight. They made love that night with a tenderness and passion that left them both shaken, their connection deeper than physical, their souls seeming to intertwine. This was what marriage was meant to be, Catherine thought as she drifted off to sleep in Harrison's arms. Not a transaction or a social arrangement, but this profound joining of two people who had chosen each other and committed to building a life together. The winter slowly gave way to spring. The snow melted, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green. The creek swelled with runoff. The cattle, thin from the hard winter but mostly intact, began to spread out through the pastures again. Harrison and Catherine had lost only 3 head, far better than they had feared. "We made it," Harrison said one morning in early April, standing on the porch with Catherine and looking out over their valley. "Our first winter together, and we made it. Did you doubt we would?" Catherine asked, leaning into his side. "Not for a moment," Harrison said, kissing the top of her head. "Not with you beside me." In May, Catherine realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she attributed it to stress or changes in diet, but when she missed a second month and began to feel queasy in the mornings, she could no longer deny the possibility. She waited until she was certain, until Emma Thornton had confirmed her suspicions, before telling Harrison. They were sitting at the table after supper, and Catherine had been trying to find the right words all evening. "Harrison," she finally said, her voice trembling slightly. "I have something to tell you." He immediately looked concerned. "What is wrong? Are you unwell?" "No, not unwell," Catherine said quickly. "Quite the opposite, actually. Harrison, I am with child. We are going to have a baby." Harrison stared at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then, suddenly, he let out a whoop of joy that startled Catherine. He jumped up, pulled her to her feet, and spun her around despite her laughing protests. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby. Catherine, you have made me the happiest man alive." "You are pleased then?" Catherine asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Pleased?" Harrison set her down but kept his hands on her waist, his eyes shining. "I am overjoyed." "Terrified but overjoyed. A child, our child. Catherine, this is everything I have ever wanted." That night, Harrison was almost absurdly gentle with her, as if she might break. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Catherine protested with a laugh. "I know, but I want to take care of you," Harrison insisted. "You are carrying our child. That makes you infinitely precious." "I was already infinitely precious to you," Catherine teased. "True," Harrison agreed, pulling her close. "But now you are doubly so." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Catherine continued to help with ranch work, though Harrison tried to limit how much heavy labor she did. The community rallied around them with advice, gifts, and offers of help. Sarah Mitchell was particularly invested, treating Catherine's pregnancy almost as if it were her own grandchild on the way. In the evenings, Harrison would place his hand on Catherine's growing belly, marveling at the changes in her body. When the baby began to move, Catherine guided his hand to the right spot so he could feel the flutters and kicks. "That is our child," Harrison would say with wonder. "Our son or daughter, growing strong in there." They spent those long summer evenings planning for the baby's arrival, discussing names, talking about the kind of parents they wanted to be. Harrison began work on a cradle, carving it with the same care he had put into Catherine's box. Catherine sewed tiny gowns and blankets, preparing a small pile of baby clothes. "I never imagined this," Catherine said one evening, folding a small gown. "When I left Boston, I was so focused on survival, on finding security. I never let myself dream about happiness, about a family, and now look at us." Harrison set aside his carving and moved to sit beside her. "We have built something remarkable, Catherine. Against all odds, despite my initial deception and your justified doubts, we have built a marriage and a life that I would not trade for anything." "Neither would I," Catherine agreed. "Not even for that mansion I thought I was coming to." Harrison laughed. "I promise, someday I will build you a much bigger house, not a mansion perhaps, but something more spacious. Something befitting Mrs. Harrison Caldwell and our growing family." "This cabin is home because you are in it," Catherine said, touching his cheek. "That is all that matters." The baby came in late January, during a break in the winter weather. Emma Thornton and Sarah Mitchell attended the birth, while Harrison paced anxiously outside the bedroom door. It was a long labor, and there were moments when Catherine thought she could not bear it. But Sarah held her hand and encouraged her, and Emma's competent presence was reassuring. Finally, after hours of work, Catherine heard the thin, angry wail of her newborn child. "A boy," Emma announced with satisfaction. "A healthy, strong boy." Sarah cleaned the baby and wrapped him in the soft blanket Catherine had made, then carried him to the door. "Harrison, come meet your son." Harrison burst into the room, his face pale but lit with joy. He approached the bed where Catherine lay exhausted but smiling, and Emma placed the tiny bundle in his arms. "Catherine," Harrison breathed, staring down at the red, wrinkled face of his son. "Look what we made, look at him." "He has your nose," Catherine said with a tired laugh. "Poor child," Harrison joked, but his voice was thick with emotion. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, holding the baby where Catherine could see him. What shall we name him? They had discussed many names over the months, but in that moment, Catherine knew exactly what felt right. William, she said, after your father, William Harrison Caldwell. Harrison's eyes filled with tears. William, he repeated. Yes, my father would have loved him, loved you. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for this gift, for our son, for everything. Emma and Sarah left them alone after ensuring both mother and baby were stable. Harrison sat on the bed with Catherine and their son, the three of them a small, complete unit in the lamplight. I love you, Harrison said, looking from his son to his wife. I never knew I could feel this much. It is almost frightening how much I love both of you. I know, Catherine said softly. I feel it too. This is what I came west for, even though I did not know it. Not a mansion, not security, but this. A family, love, home. Harrison leaned over carefully and kissed her, tender and reverent. You are home, Catherine. You always will be. William proved to be a good baby, healthy and growing rapidly. Harrison was a devoted father, constantly amazed by every small development. He would hold his son for hours, just watching him sleep or making silly faces to coax out smiles. As winter gave way to spring again, Catherine marveled at how much her life had changed in less than 2 years. She had arrived in Wyoming expecting a mansion and a wealthy husband. Instead, she had found a small cabin and an honest cowboy, and in that apparent disappointment, she had discovered everything that truly mattered. The ranch continued to prosper. With careful management and hard work, Harrison's herd grew. By the time William was walking, they had nearly doubled their cattle and purchased more land. Harrison began work on an addition to the cabin, adding 2 more rooms so they had more space. Still not a mansion, he said one evening as they watched the sunset from their expanded porch, William playing at their feet. No, Catherine agreed, taking his hand, but it is home, it is ours. And that makes it better than any mansion ever could be. Life settled into a rhythm of work and family. William grew into a sturdy, curious child who loved the ranch and followed his father everywhere. Catherine continued to manage the household and help with the ranch work, her skills honed by years of practice. They added a daughter to their family 2 years after William's birth, a golden-haired girl they named Rose, and then another son, Jacob, 2 years after that. The cabin that had once seemed so small now rang with children's laughter. The ranch that had been built by one man's hands became a family legacy. The community that had welcomed a frightened Boston woman now counted her as one of its most valued members. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Harrison surprised Catherine with a gift. He led her to the rise overlooking their valley, the same spot where she had first seen the cabin all those years ago. Look, he said, pointing. Catherine looked and saw that their small cabin had become a proper ranch house, expanded over the years into something comfortable and substantial. The barn was large and well-built. Fenced pastures stretched in every direction, full of cattle that bore their brand. In the garden, she could see Rose playing while William and Jacob did their chores. We built all of this, Harrison said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. You and I together. Starting from almost nothing, we built an empire. Not an empire, Catherine corrected, leaning back against him. A home, a family, a life that is so much better than an empire. Harrison turned her to face him. Do you ever regret it? Marrying the poor cowboy instead of waiting for the wealthy rancher I pretended to be. Catherine cupped his face in her hands, looking into the warm, honey eyes that she had loved for a decade. I have never regretted it for a single moment. You gave me something no wealthy rancher could have provided. You gave me honest love, Harrison, and that has made all the difference. They kissed there on the rise, husband and wife, partners and lovers, their children playing in the valley below and their whole life stretching ahead of them. Catherine had come west expecting a mansion, expecting security bought with wealth. Instead, she had found a small cabin, backbreaking work, and a man who offered nothing but his honest love. And in receiving that love, in giving her own in return, Catherine had discovered that she was wealthier than she had ever imagined possible. The mansion she had expected would have been cold and empty. The life she had built with Harrison was warm and full, every corner inhabited by love, every moment infused with meaning. As the sun set over the Wyoming Valley, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and rose, Catherine thought about the frightened woman who had stepped off the train in Sweetwater Springs so long ago. That woman had been looking for the wrong things, measuring her worth and her future in terms of material comfort and social position. This woman, Harrison Caldwell, wife and mother and rancher, knew better. She knew that true wealth was measured in love freely given and received. She knew that security came not from grand houses, but from the strength of the partnership she had built with her husband. She knew that the only thing that truly mattered was the family she had created and the life they shared. "Ready to go home?" Harrison asked, taking her hand. Catherine smiled, squeezing his fingers. "I am already home," she said. "Wherever you are, I am home." They walked down into the valley together, toward the house where their children waited, toward the life they had built together. Behind them, the sun sank below the horizon, and ahead, lights blazed in the windows, welcoming them home. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of challenges and joys. William grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did, often riding out before dawn to check on the cattle without being asked. Rose developed a talent for working with the horses, gentling even the most skittish animals with patience and soft words. Jacob, the youngest, showed an unexpected interest in books and learning, reminding Catherine of herself. Harrison's hair began to show silver at the temples, and Catherine found laugh lines forming around her eyes. They were no longer the young couple who had nervously married on that summer day, but something even better, partners who had weathered storms together and emerged stronger for it. The ranch became known throughout the territory as one of the most well-run operations, not because it was the largest, but because of the care and integrity with which it was managed. Harrison's reputation for fair dealing and quality cattle brought buyers from as far as Denver. Catherine's hospitality became legendary, with travelers often going out of their way to stop at the Caldwell Ranch, knowing they would receive a warm welcome and excellent food. On quiet evenings, after the children were in bed, Harrison and Catherine would sit together on the porch they had expanded over the years. Sometimes they talked about their plans, about William eventually taking over more of the ranch operations, about Rose's dream of breeding fine horses, about Jacob's interest in perhaps becoming a teacher someday. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the stars emerge in the vast Wyoming sky. "Do you remember that first dinner we had at the hotel?" Harrison asked one such evening, when I had to confess everything. "I remember thinking my life was over," Catherine admitted. "I thought you had ruined everything, that I had traveled 2,000 miles for nothing." "And instead," Harrison prompted, a smile in his voice. "And instead I found everything I needed," Catherine said, turning to look at him. The lamplight from inside the house cast a warm glow on his face, highlighting the strong features she had come to love so deeply. "You gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me, Harrison. You gave me the chance to discover who I truly was, what I was capable of. You believed in me before I believed in myself." "You gave me the same gift," Harrison said softly. "I was so lonely before you came, Catherine. I had built this ranch, but it felt empty, purposeless. You filled it with life and love and meaning. You made everything worthwhile." They sat together as the night deepened, Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life from honesty and hard work and love. The cabin that had once seemed so inadequate was now a home that sheltered not just their bodies but their hearts. The ranch that had been one man's struggle was now a family legacy that would continue for generations. Inside the house, their children slept safely, dreaming their own dreams. Around them, the land they had worked so hard to nurture stretched fertile and productive. Above them, the stars wheeled through the sky, constant and eternal, bearing witness to the life they had created. Catherine leaned her head on Harrison's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his body, the absolute rightness of being exactly where she was. She had expected a mansion when she came west. She had expected luxury and ease and social position. Instead, she had received a small cabin, backbreaking work, and a cowboy who said all he had was honest love. And that honest love had built an empire of the heart, richer than any mansion, more valuable than any fortune. It had created a family, a legacy, a life worth living. It had transformed a frightened woman running from her past into a strong woman embracing her future. It had turned two strangers into soulmates, two separate lives into one shared journey. As the night wind whispered through the valley, carrying the scent of sage and grass and home, Catherine smiled. She had everything she had ever truly needed, even if she had not known to ask for it. She had love, honest and deep and enduring. She had family. She had home. And that, she knew with absolute certainty, was worth more than all the mansions in the world. The end of their story was really just the continuation of their life together. Each day another stitch in the quilt of their shared existence. They grew old together in that valley, watching their children grow and eventually bring home partners of their own. They welcomed grandchildren, delighting in tiny hands and first steps all over again. They added on to the house yet again, creating space for family gatherings that filled every room with noise and laughter. Through it all, Harrison and Catherine remained what they had always been: partners, lovers, best friends. They worked side by side even as their bodies slowed, their hands still finding each other across the table at meals, their eyes still meeting with understanding and affection. On their 50th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered to celebrate. The house overflowed with family, 3 generations of Caldwells filling the home that love had built. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, stories told and retold about the early days, about the mail-order bride who expected a mansion and the cowboy who offered honest love instead. That night, exhausted but happy, Harrison and Catherine sat once more on their porch watching the familiar stars. 50 years, Harrison mused. Half a century since I met you on that train platform and fell in love at first sight. 50 years since I almost got back on that train and left, Catherine replied. Thank goodness I was too stubborn to give up without seeing what you were offering. What do you think your grandmother would say if she could see you now? Harrison asked. Would she approve? Catherine considered the question. I think she would be surprised, she said honestly. But I also think she would understand. She valued strength and capability above all else. She would see that I found both here, and she would see that I am happy, truly happy in a way I never was in Boston. I am happy too, Harrison said quietly. Every single day, I wake up grateful that you took a chance on me, that you stayed, that you built this life with me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Catherine Caldwell. And you are mine, Harrison Caldwell, Catherine replied, taking his hand. My unexpected gift, my honest love. They sat together under the stars, 2 people who had started as strangers bound by necessity and had become everything to each other. The mansion Catherine had expected would have crumbled by now, its grandeur faded, its luxury meaningless. But the love they had built, The family they had created, the life they had shared, that was eternal, unshakable, perfect. As the night deepened and the stars blazed above their valley, Harrison helped Catherine to her feet. "Come on, Mrs. Caldwell," he said with the smile that still made her heart flutter even after 50 years. "Let us go to bed. Tomorrow is another day, and I want to spend every moment of it with you." "Every moment," Catherine agreed, following him into the house that love had built, into the life that honesty had created, into the future they would continue to share for however many days they were blessed to have. The door closed behind them, the lights in the windows glowing warm and welcoming, a beacon of home and love in the vast Wyoming night. Inside, surrounded by family and filled with 50 years of memories, Harrison and Catherine Caldwell settled in for another night together, their last thought before sleep the same as it had been for 5 decades. Gratitude for the day just lived and anticipation for the day to come. They had found their happily ever after not in a mansion but in a cabin, not in luxury but in honest work, not in pretense but in truth. And that made it all the sweeter, all the more precious, all the more real. Their love story, which had begun with deception and doubt, had become a testament to the power of honesty, partnership, and genuine affection. It had proven that the greatest treasures in life cannot be bought or built, only earned through dedication, nurtured through care, and cherished through all the days given to us. And so they lived, surrounded by love, sustained by each other, their days full of purpose and their hearts full of joy, until the end of their days, together always, just as they had promised on that summer day so long ago when a mail-order bride expected a mansion, and a cowboy said all he had was honest love. And together they discovered that was all they needed to build everything that truly mattered.